have for our next session Dr. Harrick Vin, CTO of TCS. Also happens to be my batchmate from IIT Bombay, but I was mechanical, he was computer science. So there was some talk earlier about let's not have AI all together, one after the other, and hence let's have it stop later. But we covered AI, we covered enterprises. He's a CTO who knows AI better than anybody else. He's TCS, so he knows the enterprise world better than anybody else. And so we couldn't have hoped to have any better speaker for this particular session. I'll just give you a brief background. He did his PhD in the US and was a professor at Texas Austin for 15 years. So he spent 15 years in the US and then he came back to India. And I still remember his thought when he came back to India that if I'm coming to India, why should I work with a multinational? I should work with an Indian company. And hence he joined TCS, and the rest, as they say, is history. So he has been doing multiple things. One of the earliest things he did was headed a product within TCS, and that's actually a startup within TCS called Ignio. I don't know how many of you have heard of it, but in the enterprise world, just as there was IBM Watson, TCS built Ignio. And I still remember Harry telling me that it was, what does Ignio do? Autonomous driving of business. In 4 short words, he had explained to me what Ignio does. He then went on to become the head of TRDDC, Tata Research Design and Development Center, their big research arm. And after that, he was the Chief Innovation Officer of TCS. And to now, finally, when he has become the CTO of TCS. So no better person to give you a vision of what's happening, what's coming in this new technology world. And that's what we have asked him to talk about. Of course, he will present, he will have slides, but I'm pretty sure there will be a lot of questions from our side as well. And I welcome all the questions that you would have for Harrick. It's not often that even we get to catch hold of him. He's continuously traveling. I should tell you that last night, 1 o'clock is when he's got back to Pune. And now he's back here to talk to us. So thank you so much, Harrick. It's all yours.
Thank you very much, guys. And thanks, Giri, for the opportunity, and indeed a pleasure to be here. So I think what I thought, I was listening to the previous 2 panels and so on. I thought what I'll do is, by the way, so this startup that we did, it's called Digitate. The product is called Ignio. It's an enterprise, you can say it is sort of Gen AI before this version of Gen AI. So it was a company that we founded in 2015. And now it's a sort of a unicorn by itself. So it's done well, we know what, and a lot of the things that you were talking about earlier about what is the difficulty in selling to enterprises. We've been there, done that. Now there are 250 enterprise customers globally for Ignio and so on. So a lot of pain we've gone through, although I'm part of TCS, right? So I resonate very much with a lot of the things that you guys were talking about. So what I'll do now is spend a little bit of time on what is this era that we live in? What are some of the opportunities? What is everyone doing, including startups and large enterprises? Why there is a big gap between sort of, if you will, the hype and the reality? What is causing that gap? And what are sort of new opportunities for startups? Right, so we'll sort of do this. I'll do that probably in 25-30 minutes, and then we'll just open up for discussion. So let me start by saying that actually we sort of live in a very interesting era, an era unlike anything that we have seen before. An era where this concept of hybrid workforce, where people and machines will work shoulder to shoulder, and with each assisting and augmenting the other, is becoming a reality faster than anyone had anticipated. Important to note that we are not talking about automation helping people. I'm saying people will continuously assist and augment machines. It is in AI parlance. You can say reinforcement learning with human feedback. And machine is continuously assisting and augmenting people. And this cyclical loop that is getting created, or the virtuous cycle, if you will, that is getting created by this mutual augmentation is likely to lead to almost doubling of the capacity of individuals, teams, or organizations to produce value every 12 to 18 months. Right? Just let that the sentence sink in, because we are used to 5 to 7% year-on-year improvement in productivity. If it is 10x larger, you will see many kinds of disruptions happen. Why do I believe this is going to happen? It's happening because we are sort of witnessing almost a perfect storm that is brewing because of three forces that are coming together at the same time. The first, as you can imagine, in almost all of your companies, software is at the heart of your businesses. And software is the heart of any business function, you name it. Time to build software is shrinking by a factor of 2. Nowadays, about 9 to 10 months. Right? The intelligence of software is doubling probably every 12 to 18 months. And the workspaces that people use to do work, that is not done by machine, they are also becoming more intelligent by the day. For example, if you look at your Office Copilot, I think several people talked about these note takers is essentially an example of a workspace becoming more intelligent. And this is the tip of the iceberg. The workspace also will become more and more intelligent, probably doubling in intelligence every year. So when you look at the combination of these three forces, all occurring at the same time, is potentially going to cause this exponential era of improvement in the capacity of people to do work and generate value. And when you think about such an exponential era, the work economics will completely get disrupted in every domain of work. It doesn't matter which domain we're talking about. So all of us have witnessed one such exponential era in our lifetime, which shows, it is called Moore's Law. So Moore's Law basically said that you basically number of transistors on a chip, or in some sense, the chip's capacity will double every 12 to 18 months. And the world we live in today, the tech world, is actually a result of Moore's Law. In fact, all the big companies of 80s in the tech world are dead, and all the big companies of today did not exist in the 80s. Right? This particular exponential era that we are just entering is likely to be far more disruptive, because it is not just about the tech industry, it is about every industry that is likely to get disrupted. Right? So I keep saying that only the dynamic will survive. And the concept of dynamic here is basically companies or individuals, for that matter, who will master the art of inventing and perhaps adopting, perhaps more importantly, adopting work next practices, not best practices, work next practices continuously. Because if you don't, somebody else will eat your lunch guaranteed. Because if it is 2x increase every 12 to 18 months, you don't have much time to not actually do this. So, and that's the game, right? So given that is the game, it's perhaps the best time ever to be doing startups. But it is also a time where startup itself will die faster than ever before, unless you know how to actually become dynamic yourself. And that's perhaps the most important thing that we all have to think through. So when I now look at exactly sort of this whole idea of defining next practices or becoming dynamic, there are a spectrum of possibilities when you think about how do you use AI or infuse AI to define these next practices. So there are three different, I would say, sort of spectrums of opportunities that are there. The first one is what I would call as activity-centric AI, which is, I would say, 95% of what everybody is doing, including many of the talks that I heard today. And the goal of activity-centric AI is essentially to improve productivity, reduce cost, improve productivity, improve speed. Basically, create Scaling capacity. I think the radiology thing, you talked about increasing capacity to handle many more reports per day. That's kind of so that's kind of the first category of. The second category is what I call as human-centric AI. This is all about not just improving productivity of individual activity, but truly making people better. Right? How do you take a 2-year-old experienced software engineer and make them as good as a 20-year-old software engineer? Or how do you make a 2-year experienced underwriter in insurance to become as good as a 20-year-old underwriter? That is human-centric AI, making people do things that they can't do today. Right? That is the next level up. So the next generation of startups will probably come from the middle column. And the biggest disruption will happen from the third, which I call as adaptation-centric AI. I'll explain that when we get there. Right? So I'm going to spend one slide on each of them. The key of this adaptation-centric AI is using the technology to actually redefine value and value dimension completely. And I'll give you some examples of what that is, right? And where disruptions will happen. Because disruptions will happen not because you keep improving productivity. That's kind of a given almost. Disruptions will happen when you actually learn how to use technology to define new value and new businesses. And that's where disruption. So as you move to the right, the disruption index will go up, which also means the opportunity for startups to actually become the disruptor actually dramatically increases when you go to the right. So I'm going to, as I said, do one slide on each one of them. So the first one, which is this activity-centric AI, as I said, about 95% of everything that anybody is doing within enterprises or within startups is in this particular category. By the way, I think in TCS, we have this thing called we call it co-innovation network. And this co-innovation network, we have built relationships with, as you can imagine, every large VC in the world. And so at any given point in time, there are probably at least 3,000 startups that are on our radar. And we know where the world is and where it is going. Right? So a lot of what I'm going to tell you about is actually, and of course, as TCS, we have 2,000 of the world's largest companies as our customers. So we know sort of what they are doing, what they are succeeding, what they are failing at, and as well as the same thing for startups. So this particular slide is a good summary of where I think the state of the world is with respect to AI. Right? So this activity-centric AI is actually, if I were to sort of de-jargonize everything, it's all about actually making information available at the fingertips of people, or automation at the fingertips of people. Right? Just to give you an example of some of these things, for example, if you think about a contact center or a customer support center, information at the fingertips is essentially is like saying when Harrick calls, who is Harrick? Is he a valuable customer? When was the last time he called? Is he a happy customer? Etc. etc. Automation at the fingertips of the customer support engineer or customer support agent would be things like capture the transcript of the call, summarize the call, extract sentiment, generate an email, communicate back. That's all automation at the fingertips. Right? As I said, 95% of what everybody is doing, startups and enterprises, falls in this category. Right? The goal of this is to reduce friction. So instead of going to 20 different systems to find out about who Harrick is, well, you will actually get AI to go extract, summarize, and offer that to me in a very simple snapshot. The other one is obviously improve productivity. So the customer support engineer or customer support agent does not need to actually then spend time summarizing the call, how did the call go, etc. Follow-up steps, action items, etc. All that is gone. That's sort of what that is. We are currently at an early stage of deployment for most large enterprises. In fact, most of these deployments actually fail to deliver expected ROI today. There are many reports that are actually saying, there is a report from MIT that said 95% of these things don't deliver any value. I mean, whether you agree with the number 95 or not is irrelevant. I mean, there is, Gartner has said that nearly 50% of the agentic AI projects will be scrapped in a year. Right? Now, whether you agree with 50, 95, whether 95, 75, 50, 60, it doesn't matter, but these are large numbers, is the only point that I'm trying to make. So, you have to first spend time to try and understand why is this happening. Because on one hand, you have the tech company bandwagon that is actually saying that world is, you can solve world hunger. And the reality is nowhere close to that. Why? Right? So the basic unmet need for everyone is that there is inherent challenges in realizing and scaling benefits. Let's try to understand why that is the case. So what does that mean actually? What I'm trying to say basically is that there is a non-linear translation between task level productivity, your activity level productivity and ROI, which will be typically cost reduction or things of that sort. Why is that? So what has happened actually, interestingly, is that over the last 20, 30 years, every organization to deal with complexity and scale, we have basically most organization designs are optimized for efficiency and scale. So to deal with complexity, we have actually divided and you sort of applied the principle of sort of computer science principle of divide and conquer in some sense, right? You have taken anything complex, divided into a large number of little pieces, and then each of these little pieces is now handled by a specialized, what I would call as narrow specialist teams. Now, we are actually taking AI and taking tasks or activities done by the so-called narrow specialists and improving productivity at that level. Right? Now, that is definitely helping that one narrow specialist, if you will. But it is not resulting in headcount reduction or cost reduction. Why is that the case? Because you have divided this world into so many little layers and silos that each layer and silo has essentially effectively one person. I mean, I'll give you an example of technology operations or business operations, right? If you think about tech ops or biz ops as a domain, which is where every organization is spending lots and lots of money today. About 70% of the tech spend or biz spend is on ops. If you look at that spend, and if you look at the teams and the org design structure, it's actually divided into lots and lots of layers and silos. So if you think about technology operations, you start by actually dividing it by business units, business functions, then there will be application portfolios, so you divide it. Then every application portfolio, then you will say, oh, it is running on a bunch of platforms like I have an SAP, I have an Oracle, so there will be a division by that. Then you come one level down, then you will say the infrastructure itself is further divided. You will have a Linux tower, a Windows tower, you will have an Oracle tower, a database tower, you will have a AWS tower. Each one of them will have at least one person in that tower. So one person, by the way, per shift is equal to 5 people because you do 24/7 operations. You can't reduce 1 to 0. Right? Unless it is fully autonomous, I can't reduce 1 to 0. So, by doing this AI infusion and automation, you're creating a lot of time for people to have coffee. Coffee sales will go up. Good time to build a startup in coffee. But ROI won't be there. Because you can't go from 1 to 0. So, what is the solution? So, the solution is actually reversal of what has happened for 20, 30 years. which is we have actually gone to this whole idea of segregation of roles and responsibilities. And this was done in a non-AI era. It was done for a human workforce model. If you think about a hybrid workforce model, that whatever we have done is exactly opposite of what you should be doing. Because now you have to go segregation, from segregation to aggregation. And by the way, this is already happening. So if you think about technology operations, and you go look at any of the so-called large enterprises, they run what is called an ITIL set of processes. And they have these level 1 team. By the way, so even within the database tower, you will have a level 1 team, level 2 team, level 3 team. With different levels of specialization. Why have we done this? To deal with complexity and scale. Efficiency. Right? Now what's happening is actually reverse starting to reverse. So you're starting to see things like SREs, site reliability engineers. Site reliability engineers are essentially aggregation of roles. So all your level 1, level 2, level 3 and across stack is getting consolidated into a site reliability engineer. Or a DevOps engineer, or DevSecOps engineer is essentially, or even software engineering. So we used to have for sort of front-end engineering, back-end engineering, security engineering, cloud engineering, all that into slowly getting aggregated into full stack engineers. So that transition is a fairly substantial transition and it's slow because organizations are not designed this way. And so that's why there is a big gap between sort of hype and reality. So key point here is that unless an organization, the imperative for most organizations is to actually do organization redesign for hybrid workforce and not just do band-aids used by dropping in technology. That will not generate ROI. So the success stories that you hear are from AI native companies because they don't have the baggage. The large enterprises that you guys are selling to, they are baggage, enterprise equal to baggage. Alright, so that's the challenge. So unless that happens, the whole organization redesign starts kicking in, which is a large transformation project for every large company. And that's something that you have to internalize. In fact, this is also a startup opportunity. I'll come to that in the last slide. Right? So I think that's the first problem to understand. So that we need to go through role and skill consolidation for today's AI that is activity-centric AI to actually matter at all. Otherwise, there will be no ROI. There will be some. 10-20% will be there, but that is not going to actually be of much value at all. The other point to keep in mind, which many startup founders essentially sort of get stuck into, which is that you'll say I can do 20% better, but you have to remember that this activity-centric AI has the unfortunate characteristic of rising tide will lift all boats. So your 10-20% will go away because everybody will be 18%, 17%. The differentiation is not sustainable. So if you want to build a sustainable business, you probably don't want to be doing activity-centric AI because that's going to be very hard to sustain. So you'll have to move on to something else, right? So that's the first point. That's where we are and why there is a gap between hype and reality. It is less to do with technology, it has more to do with organization design. That the value is not translating, the translation is non-linear. And that's perhaps the biggest challenge. Now, having said that, now if you go to the next level, we talked about this concept of human-centric AI. So, if you look at what I just said in the previous chart, I said that we are slowly transitioning towards this concept of aggregation of roles. Right? So one person now empowered to do or expected to handle more complex situations. Right? The complexity has not gone away, by the way. In fact, the complexity has gone up. So just because you want to get cost savings by introducing AI doesn't mean that your aggregation will work. Because remember, why did we go down the path in the first place? We went down this path because we couldn't deal with scale. So we had to decouple to actually achieve scale. So what this is saying is that the use of AI, we are looking in the wrong direction. We are looking at AI to automate and improve productivity, but we should actually look at AI to deal with complexity. Because if AI can help me deal with complexity and make me better, it will generate value. Because aggregation plus complexity, AI for complexity equals value. And that's why I feel that that's where sort of the next wave of, if you will, startups will happen. So, and this, the challenge with complexity is that every domain of knowledge work, we see a substantial gap between average and elite. Your best doctor versus average doctor, best lawyer, average lawyer, best customer support agent, average customer, best sales. I mean, there was a discussion about sales, right? Best sales and average sales. Big gap. In fact, in software engineering, the gap is 100x. You're not talking 10, 20%, 100x the gap between so-called average software and elite software as measured in terms of metrics like all the DevOps metrics, things like time to introduce change-induced error rates, mean time to recover from failure, average number of pain minutes, business pain minutes. If you start measuring, the gap between average and elite is 100x. What is fascinating is that 100x has not moved at all. It has stayed 100x for the last decade, although the productivity has improved leaps and bounds. And if you once again ask the question, why is this the case? This is happening because of the fact that every type of knowledge work is a combination of decisions and actions. Whenever we are improving productivity today, with all the examples that I gave you earlier, the technology or AI is used on actions. The decisions that people make are still done based on a lot of tacit knowledge that people have acquired over time. That's why a 20-year-old experienced underwriter is more trustworthy, if you will, than a 2-year-old experienced. That's why you go to a 20-year-old experienced doctor and not a freshy doctor. Because the decisions they make are the difference. Why is there a 100x difference in the software quality? It's because of the decisions that people make. I think there was a bunch of points made earlier about when you do vibe coding and whatever, the quality of code is not good. The design is not getting generated. Those are all decisions, architectural choices, design choices. Code generation, test case generation is action. So if you only apply to action, you will just produce garbage faster. You don't produce good quality stuff. In fact, interestingly, these so-called elite people or people with tacit knowledge is the most scarce resource in every company. If you can make that scarcity into transform scarcity into abundance, you win. The company also wins, by the way. But how do you do this? Well, you have to essentially change the role of AI from information and automation at the fingertips to what I would call as expertise and wisdom at my fingertips. So if I'm a sales guy, the previous discussion, how do I make a sales guy achieve, so if you look at your organizations, what you realize is that there is a big difference between the best sales guy in terms of time to sell and the average sales guy. Can you make everybody become as good as the best sales guy? So if you ask the question, where is the gap? It's actually all decision-making gaps. They are not actually gaps in productivity. They're all using the same tools. But they are making decisions different. So is it possible to use technology to actually augment people's judgment and creativity? Very different from what all the use cases that we've been talking about. These are not judgment and creativity use cases. They are all productivity use cases. And if you can do that, we will actually make a huge difference. Can this be done? Absolutely. With today's technology, by the way. Right? So that's really sort of where it is. So what that allows us to do is dramatically reduce the randomness or the variability in the quality of output that is getting generated, and also bring this notion of elite by design. So actually address the fundamental challenge that every organization has. I mean, 10% of the people within an organization actually delivers the most value, 90% of the value. And those 10%, if that 10% becomes 20%, because you're taking off the 90%, the best 10% of the 90%, and then making them as good as the remaining, actually every business will win big way. That's the game. So you're looking in the wrong direction. My personal opinion, of course, I'm sure you disagree with me, but that's fine. That's why the goal here is to be provocative, so that I'll go one more level of provocativeness. So you have to think about using AI differently, not to do stupid things. That will anyway happen. And as I said, the productivity is rising tide will lift all boats. You will not be able to differentiate in the market because you auto-generate your emails. Everybody will do. Okay, so the third level, I think is where I feel the biggest disruptions will happen. I call it adaptation-centric AI. What is adaptation-centric AI? It's actually motivated by this observation that this customer value stagnation is actually a big problem for every successful company. In fact, a company is falling out of S&P 500 every 2 weeks. And that rate is accelerating. So if you go back and look at the number of companies, the list of companies in S&P 500, in year 2000, 2010, 2011, 2020, and analyze that data, you will realize that about 200 to 250 of these companies that were there in 2000 are no longer in member of S&P 500 by 2010. 2011, same story. Why is this? It is because of the fact that all these, if you cannot be in S&P 500 unless you're immensely successful in the first phase. But they are not able to maintain. By the way, also the time that a company stays in S&P 500 once it actually gets introduced into S&P 500 has shrunk from 30 years to 15 years and shrinking fast. Why is that? Because value stagnates. The value to customer stagnates. And when that happens, you are opening up an opportunity for somebody else, startups, to potentially come in and actually disrupt. Can you just click on that thing? Yes, please. Thank you. So this is happening because this principle of S-curve of work. Actually, this principle of S-curve was defined by, actually popularized, I would say, by Clayton Christensen. He is a professor at Harvard. Actually, the author of the Innovator's Dilemma book, where he had actually argued that every technology follows this S-curve principle. That it takes a long time for a technology to mature. I mean, if you think about Gen AI, this is decades. Then once it has reached a certain level of maturity, it improves very fast, last 2 years of Gen AI, and then it is likely to stagnate. And every technology goes through this S-curve. By the way, every work also seems to go through a very similar S-curve principle. Every company also goes through an S-curve. And that's why when you're on the flattened part of the S-curve, it's an opportunity for somebody else to actually disrupt. In fact, so what every organization has to do ideally is to track this blue line, dashed blue line. That you have to essentially ride and jump S-curves to continuously increase value to customer. Y-axis is value to customers, X-axis is time. You have to continuously reinvent yourselves to increase value to customer. And this, as you can imagine, is not easy to do. At a company level, at a business level, at a function level also it is not easy to do. But if you think about a large organization, it's a complex network of all different kinds of work that actually come together to generate value. Right? You can do your sale. I think the point you made earlier, Madam, aapne becha kya? Right? That happens all the time, and the larger the organization becomes, the bigger the gap, and hence the substantial value stagnation. In fact, you'll realize that there is a big gap between value realization by customer, even within your customer set. And that happens because you're at that, unfortunately, you're stagnating. And it's very hard to do this. In fact, disruptions happen when a newcomer comes in and defines the y-axis, redefines the y-axis. Does not continue with the old y-axis, but redefines value. If you look at this Innovator's Dilemma book, it's a brilliant book that explains why this happens. But if you look at several examples, basically the disk, hard disk, which is sort of the most popular example in that book, is that the y-axis used to be the storage capacity of a disk. The larger the capacity, the better it was. The disruption happened when a new player came in and said that no, storage capacity doesn't matter, it will anyway increase. What matters is the physical size of the disk. And those smaller the disk, so it went from mainframes to desktops to laptops to now phones to SSDs. And all the old guys died in the process. If you look at what has happened with cloud, it is a change in y-axis. It is server capacity, the old value, bigger, faster server, more gigahertz, etc., etc. Today, nobody talks about gigahertz. You only talk about time to provision. Y-axis has changed. And those are the ones that are going to be highly disruptive, and that will disrupt industries. And this time around, all industries are, everything is potential. I think there are some multiple examples we can go through, but these are some just examples. I'll take some technology modernization. It's a great example, right? TCS does this work for thousands of customers, where we continuously modernize their technology estate, right? And today the value is cost to modernize or at best time to modernize. We go from mainframe to Java or mainframe to this or that or whatever, right? But every modernization project is by definition taking you from legacy to legacy. Because by the time you finish a modernization project, it takes you 3 years to modernize anyway. By the time the project is done, you're legacy by design. So you're perennially in legacy. And every large company is a victim of this. So disruption will happen. If a startup can come and say, boss, when I modernize you once, you're modern forever. This is future-proofing as value, not cost of modernization as a value. Can this be done? Yes. Right? That is power that you're going to get. And that is where you will build billion-dollar companies. Right? So there are many such examples. We'll probably skip it. Customer support. Let's just take one more and then I'll skip this. See, I mean, today, for example, the efficiency of customer support is the focus. That's where we are applying activity-centric AI. Right? But the obvious question one should ask is why should anybody call for customer support? Can you imagine customer support which is primarily outbound, not inbound? Because you are actually dealing with a world which is highly instrumented, with high degree of observability built into products. Why doesn't the customer support call me saying that, Harrick, your car is going to have this problem in 3 weeks? I've already made an appointment, part is available, no questions asked, in 10 minutes it will get fixed. I'll be a loyal customer for life. So future of customer support is near zero inbound calls or near zero inbound customer support. It's not about doing contact centers and customer support 20% cheaper. It is converting customer support into customer success management. In fact, in all your B2B companies, this is actually going to be the biggest differentiator. Because the variance in the value realization is what differentiates. If you can make your value realization nearly guaranteed, you will win. It is not how cheap your customer support or customer success teams are. It's about can you deliver high quality value by design. And that's what is going to decide. So in some sense, this is saying that when you take something that is a necessary evil, which is customer support, and convert that into a competitive differentiation and a disruptor, that's the power of AI. And that's what is going to happen for the future. So I think that's really sort of the adaptation-centric AI, and that requires obviously the next level of intelligence in this AI that will have to be done. So we'll skip that for now. Last point, all of this, as you can imagine, actually requires also lots of horizontal innovations or horizontal opportunities. The first horizontal, so I've just listed two. One is building effective AI solutions. Itself is a huge opportunity. Today, we are just using jackhammer called as Gen AI everywhere, regardless of whether it is useful or not. It's completely wrong. It's going to fail miserably. So you have to build hybrid and network AI, where you have to orchestrate ensemble of traditional AI, Gen AI, different types of models, sort of world-wise models to activity-wise models, industry-wise models, you name it. There is no such thing. In fact, if you go, I don't know if you haven't looked at it, you look at this project called Nanda at MIT. It's very interesting. So in fact, we are working with them. So the idea is that obviously MIT being MIT, they are talking about the world with billions of agents. We're not talking 10 agents, 5 agents, billions. How will this world work? So it will become internet of agents. And every person will have dozens of agents. Personalized agents for me, for every aspect of my life. My health, my wealth, my whatever, my career. And if that happens, how do you manage this? What is fascinating there is that this concept of dependable AI is actually going to become front and center everywhere. See, all software we have ever built, all of your products, they are static, meaning that they're not self-evolving. These agents are all self-evolving. And if they self-evolve, how do you even assure a network of these agents that is actually your enterprise tomorrow? New roles. Software engineering will go away. AI solution engineering will rise. Huge opportunity. Hundreds of billions of dollars of opportunity. Right? So that's really zero legacy AI. I mean, absolutely phenomenal. Today, we talked about, we go from legacy to legacy. In AI, the world of AI, we are becoming legacy even before you go live. Your solutions are legacy even before you go live with those solutions. So how would you actually assure that there is no legacy? Because if you accumulate legacy, there is no way for you to remain competitive. So completely different set of games, right? Each one, by the way, is a mega opportunity. Another mega opportunity is managing organization design, because the role of people is fundamentally changing. The role of people is changing from doers of work within every organization to sort of trainers and interrogators of machines, reviewer of work done by machines, and perhaps more importantly, owners of critical thinking and creativity. And as machines become more and more intelligent, the role of people will keep changing. How do you design an organization that will adapt? There is no way to do this today without technology. Just to give you a glimpse of the sign of times to come, TCS, we have 600,000 people. I mean, guys, somebody said 2 people company, right? So I was thinking, boss, you are in a very different league altogether. So 600,000 people. Half life of a skill, tech skill, has shrunk from 30 years to 5 years. And it's shrinking fast. What does that mean? That means that 1/5 of my population has to be retrained every year. That's 100,000 people. We are world's largest university by far. Just imagine, there is no tech today that helps us. And by the way, this is a problem in every large company. I was at Davos for the World Economic Forum, and we had hosted a 25 CEO lunch. And it was all about AI, as you can imagine. But after 10 minutes into this meeting, we stopped talking about AI. The entire rest 1 hour was all about what will I do with my workforce? What will I do with my people? How do I upskill? Who will be left behind? I don't want to leave people behind. And as India, we have a humongous challenge and an opportunity. We have 1.4 billion people. The concept of ambient, continuous, lifelong learning will become absolutely essential for every organization and country. There is no technology today that will allow us to do this. Huge opportunity. Okay, so that's it. So I think I would say that if there is one thing to take away, this is probably the thing. I think we are very much in a world which is very different than the world we have seen before. And we will need a lot of wisdom, vision, and perhaps most importantly, courage to lead in this world. Otherwise, it will sort of transiently will come and go and nothing much will happen. But it is indeed a time where virtually every line of business, every business function will get redefined. It is not if, it is only when. So tremendous opportunity, but you have to be much more bold to actually truly realize the potential that is unfolding in front of our eyes. Thank you very much. I'm happy to answer questions.
Thank you, Harrick. I think all of us are reeling.
I think it's probably going to be no different than before in terms of, I think several of the points that were made earlier, like, for example, will you be around? Stability. Should I trust you? All those things are there. I think ease of use and ease with which you can actually implement these solutions in customer environments will become very important. Right? How do you rapidly get people to experience your products, deliver value using your products? Becomes very important, because that's the role that SIs will play. I think SIs themselves will be reinvented. I don't believe that it will stay the way it is. I think the world of software or SaaS or products is slowly but steadily going towards servitization, because that's when you actually go from product to value, right? I believe that what is likely to happen in the next 5 years or so is the services companies will actually go closer to productization. So you will actually start seeing movement in both directions. Product companies will go towards servitization and services company will go towards productization of services, not products, but productization of services, which is a different business model. It's a business model reinvention and transformation that is likely to happen. Much like product companies doing servitization is also a business model transformation. Because both of them are eventually going to go towards how do we assure value. The problem today is that products don't assure value. They say, I'll give you hammers and screwdrivers, you figure out and get value. Which is where servitization becomes important. And the reverse is also true. Right? So I think the good news and the bad news is that it's going to be a bumpy ride.
The organization transformation.
In both directions. It's a mindset transformation for startups as well as for large companies as well as enterprise. SIs as well as enterprises.
At least we know what the largest SI is thinking. So that's a good start. Who had okay.
Harrick, TCS has a lot of products, correct? So when you are sitting in the panel where they're discussing products, and a lot of your products have been in the market for over a decade and all, how have you all been thinking about it? Like I'll give you a classic example, TCS Banks, which is one of the banking software which has been there historically forever for a lot of banks. And how do you do, what would you do if you were there today, or what would you have done yesterday?
No, I think so. Every product team has their own roadmap, much like what you guys have. So it's no different that way. My feeling is that a lot of these products will have to rethink. In fact, I'll give you an example of Ignio. In fact, Ignio was something that I built. And I ran into this a month ago. I was with the team and I was essentially challenging them and saying that if we had to build Ignio today, would I do it the way I had done it 10 years ago? The answer is no. I would probably eliminate 80-90% of what is in the product and focus on 10%. And actually act with that 10%. So I think every product, in my opinion, will have to ask that question. Because you have to really ask the question, where is the value? Or where is the high variance in value? So I think going back to this previous point, so Ignio has, let's say, 250 customers, right? There will be probably 20% of the customer where the value realization is very high. There are probably 25-30% where the value realization is very poor and everybody else is in the middle. And the time to value is also highly variable. Because it's all enterprise implementation and 27 other people will have to play ball with you before the ball moves. Right? Including from your security advice, security boards and whatnot, right? So it's a challenge. So the question now is, what can you learn? And that goes back to my riding and jumping S-curves or potentially changing the y-axis. So if I had to do Ignio today, I would probably do it very different. I would change the y-axis. Because in 10 years, almost all products are saying the same thing. They're equally good or equally bad. And they are not all delivering the real value. The pain hasn't gone away. The pain of 10 years ago and pain today is identical. If you think about ops, the pain for every large company is what I would describe as watermelon effect. What is watermelon effect? Every team thinks that they are green, their SLAs are green, fantastic. You will declare victory saying my product is best things since sliced bread. Businesses are absolutely unhappy. It is the same as 10 years ago. Red in the inside, green on the outside. That is the state of every enterprise today. Right? No product has helped. Why? Build a product that will actually attack that problem. It's a $100 billion opportunity. And so I think it's, you have to think like this, because these are all problems that have sustained over time. So these products, all these products have to be redefined in my opinion. I mean, we've been building, for example, robots. So I have a team that builds various kinds of robots. And about a month ago, I was telling them that maybe we're in the wrong business. Maybe we shouldn't be building robots. And they looked at me and said, you must be crazy. So and the realization was that actually, we can't actually compete in that space. Because there are lots of companies that will build robots. Yeah, I can say my shirt is a little whiter than your shirt today. But well, your shirt will get whiter tomorrow and mine will get dirtier tomorrow. So it's non-sustainable. So where is the value? Where is the potential? What we're realizing is that if you think about every robot as just a hand and feet, an organization needs a brain that orchestrates robots and people to achieve outcomes. The brain is missing today. There are lots of robot companies. They all come and die, actually. There are more deaths in robotics than any other domain. Why? Because the brain is missing. So you are constantly actually buying hands and feet. But to integrate them and actually orchestrate with intelligence to achieve outcomes, absolutely missing. Huge opportunity.
Yes. The next question?
Yeah.
Harrick, in one of the slides you mentioned expertise at fingertips.
Wisdom and expertise at fingertips, yes.
So would this mean that the specialist roles have the risk of getting flattened out or people will get pushed for higher order thinking?
I think they will be pushed for higher order thinking. Actually, my belief is the following. What is going to happen is that you will raise the median substantially with AI, but you will also move the top. So I call it big C creativity and small c creativity. Small c creativity is actually all about making contextually optimal decisions using known options, which is 90-95% of what all of us do on a daily basis. There, the median you want to move up by actually getting the machine to help you actually make better judgments and better decisions. I believe that machines will also help me make big C creativity is actually coming up with new options by challenging me to think differently. I think we are not that far from that point in time. So I believe that both will move, but the gap will shrink. Right? So today we are 100x, probably it will become 10x. The median will move up, and the top will also move up. And the top, that 2%, will actually anyway dictate most of what companies do. The value is generated by the top 2%. The remaining 98% are there to actually ensure that you can count money.
Thank you.
Yeah. Do I need mic? Yeah. Oh.
Yeah, one question. In your view, from your experience of dealing with the customers, what the customer looked at from a software 10 years back, has that changed? No.
Not really. I think they're expecting probably more from. I would say not software, but from product companies. Because I think the whole point is that all the software product companies or in general product companies have been looked at as arms dealers. Right. Somebody else has to still fight the war. You will sell, give me stories and go home, yeah. You'll count money, 98% of your company, right? You count money. So, but the pain still is, that's why services companies are there. They are the ones who are the foot soldiers to fight the real war. The problem with this model is that, once again, there is very high variance in the value realization. Because it is dependent on so many factors, right? The foot soldiers are actually thinking right, they are architecting right, they are actually using a product wisely, they are not shooting themselves on the foot, all kinds of things. The customer has to be happy, customer has to actually align, they have to think about their organization change management. If any one or two of these things fall off, value goes down to zero. So I think that, in my opinion, I think companies want value, not technology. And I think that is perhaps the fundamental thing that all of you and all of us have to internalize. It's all about value. It's not about tech. In fact, the reason why a very small percentage of these things are going into production is also because it's tech-led, not value-led. So I think whenever you're thinking, think deeply about value, value, value. And ask, where is the next S-curve? Or what is the new value? And that happens actually naturally in a startup when you're young. The moment you get to 50 million, it starts stagnating. And that's where things actually fall. But I think the expectation from the customer is really value, not software, not tech.
Actually, on that point itself, my question's around that. So you said it's redefining value, and I think the latter two points you mentioned was customer success and financial wellness. Those are the words I think you used.
Yeah.
So, I mean, just looking around the room and then what the companies here are doing, for example, Trezex will make the export-import better. That's a customer success. Eurofin, which will go towards same-day mortgage, that's customer success. What's wrong with that?
There's nothing wrong with it. I'm not saying that in general, I don't know exactly the specific companies, but I'm just saying that in general, whether it is changing the y-axis or just doing whatever everybody else is doing slightly faster and cheaper. To me, faster and cheaper is not changing the y-axis. That is just moving higher on the existing y-axis. Just think about it, right? So that's why I gave the example of, let's say, if you think about cloud, or if you think about even the disk example, right? The y-axis was the number of storage capacity of a disk, right? So many gigabytes on a disk. If the y-axis has become, whether it is 2 centimeter or 1 centimeter, the y-axis has changed. Storage capacity didn't matter. And those guys disrupted the previous guys. Right? And this is happening in every industry. So to me, the y-axis change is a very subtle but a very powerful change. So cloud, why did cloud succeed? It is because it changed the y-axis. It is not about compute capacity that I care for. I care for, instead of taking 3 months to procure a server, I can actually spin up a server in 1 minute. It is agility. So the y-axis changed to time to provision a server, or time to provision compute capacity, not on the compute capacity at all. Compute capacity is commoditized. So it was on the flattened part of the S-curve, which you could not improve. It didn't matter that much. So the only way new business could actually start by changing the y-axis. So that's why each one of these things, so the personal finance example, if you think about today, it's all about cost of advisory or cost of running a financial products. That is what financial service providers actually thinks about. Nobody is thinking about the financial wellness of the person. Right? Every financial institution today has hundreds of different products. Right? They will all sell you products, but there is no assurance of wellness of personal financial wellness. In fact, this is a huge problem in every economy. I was recently in UK where there was a discussion about, in UK there is a huge challenge because people don't know. In fact, most people are financially stupid. I mean, I'm a poster child of that, but that's a different story. But people are not financially literate. And even if you are financially literate, you cannot keep up because the products and options are changing faster than ever before. Right? So are you managing your finances well? The answer in most cases is no. And a 2-3% CAGR difference will make a huge difference over a 20-25 year span. That is the game. Which company today is offering that? That to me changes y-axis. It is not giving financial advisory cheaper. Yes, that is also new S-curve. I mean, Vanguard became Vanguard by offering financial advisory cheaper, right? Or to lower, you didn't have to be a multi-billionaire to actually get personalized financial advice. I'm saying that can you apply it to 1.4 billion Indians? Vanguard won't scale, nor will Vanguard commit to outcomes. So can you define new Vanguard that will actually define financial assurance, basically wellness, right? So that's value change, that's y-axis change, which is different than doing your trades faster. That is just a different S-curve on the same y-axis, in my mind.
Thanks.
And I think most disruptions will happen, not because you are continuing with the same value, just slightly better. Disruptions happen when you actually redefine value. Right?
Makes sense.
And by the way, another good example of this human-centric AI, if you think about pharma industry, right? Drug discovery. So every drug today takes, the end-to-end life cycle is about 10 to 12 years for the need to go to market, right? It costs $2 billion of investment. And that cycle actually is divided into two parts. There is what is called as an early phase molecule discovery, drug discovery, and then there is the clinical trials. Only after that it goes out. And the first phase costs about $500 million or a little more than that. It takes 5 to 6 years. Why? What happens today is that people come up with potential molecules for a target disease, and it goes through many cycles and it fails at a later stage. It's called late stage attrition of a molecule, because it's either the molecule is not stable, molecule is not manufacturable, etc. etc. So there are lots of iterations that happen. It's no different than software engineering. I think somebody was talking about over requirements, and this is exactly the same problem. So it's not about making somebody do this. I mean, you can do iterations fast, but you can still do 1,000 iterations, and it will still take you 5 years. So the interesting question now, the human-centric AI is, can you take a drug designer and make them dramatically better by actually eliminating most of the failure cases upfront? And we actually showed that we could do this. So we started with 1,100 molecules, and in a matter of 8 weeks, we can actually identify 11 molecules that are drug-like. It's 5 years to 8 weeks. That will completely redefine the pharma industry. Because India does not actually today invent any pharma, any medicines, because we cannot invest. If $500 million goes to 10 billion, we will completely democratize pharma industry. So that's disruption to me.
Let's have the last question, Vijay, and then we'll.
Sir, you interestingly mentioned the horizontal versus vertical, right? And I'm basically asking this question from a very narrow point of view of our business. We serve banks and NBFCs, right, where the desire for accuracy is much higher.
Yes.
Right. So that's part one. And the second part is you also mentioned that your shirt is only marginally shinier than mine, right? So basically, do you think people like us should continue to focus on the accuracies and continue to build deeper, or should we basically just say that the accuracies will take care of themselves after a certain level and move to a different use case?
No. Actually, I would do it exactly the opposite. See, that's what I was saying. I think people are using Gen AI and things of that sort in the wrong places in my mind. Right? So I would actually not use Gen AI. I would use traditional AI with learning built in. And add Gen AI more only for simplifying user experience. See, I think every solution is going to be hybrid. That you will actually combine the logical reasoning. See, because the traditional AI logical reasoning actually uses logical reasoning. So it basically is inherently explainable, it is inherently deterministic. Right? Gen AI is inherently black box, non-explainable, but it is highly adaptive. The other thing is not adaptive. So you need to find a way to combine the two. In fact, as I said, in building AI solutions, you should know where not to use Gen AI rather than use Gen AI everywhere. That's a disaster. It is guaranteed to fail. So your value will happen if you increase accuracy, but you will not be able to increase accuracy by actually using analogical reasoning. You will have to use logical reasoning.
So it's basically a combination of both. But,
Each other to combine.
but my point was, should we continue to focus on vertical use cases, or should we try to be a little more horizontal in that case?
Hard to tell. Maybe we can have an offline discussion. I don't know. Because I think both strategies are good strategies in my mind, but the customers will be very different. It will not be the same customer who will buy. The horizontal one and the vertical. The vertical one, the buyer is very different. The horizontal one, the buyer is very different.
I'll catch up with you.